Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah,
Today we're going to be talking about improving your speaking and listening skills
that's right.
with some practical techniques that you can use right at home.
Right at home, exactly.
We're actually diving into a guide that is packed with tips and tricks that don't require any fancy equipment or even conversation partners.
That's right.
So get ready to unlock your inner communication superstar.
Yeah, and this guide really stresses the importance of having a clear purpose. It's not just about practicing mindlessly,
Right.
but knowing why you want to improve.
Totally. It's like setting off on a journey without a destination in mind. You wouldn't do that.
Exactly. And the guide suggests actually writing down those goals.
Okay.
Putting pen to paper
Yeah.
can make them feel more real and tangible.
Yeah, I can see that. There's something about physically writing things down that makes them more concrete.
Absolutely.
So you've got them written down, then what?
Well, once you've got those goals down, you can try visualizing yourself succeeding
Okay.
in those scenarios. Like imagine you're giving a presentation and the audience is completely captivated.
Right.
Or picture yourself effortlessly chatting with someone in a new language.
Oh, I love that. It's almost like giving yourself that little mental preview of success.
Exactly.
So we've talked about setting goals. What about the actual skills?
Right. Well, this guide dives into both speaking and listening, and it actually highlights listening
Okay.
as a secret weapon that a lot of people overlook.
Really? I'm usually so focused on what I'm going to say
Right.
that I forget about the importance of listening sometimes.
It's so crucial, though.
Mm-hmm.
Active listening is like training your ear for those nuances in communication.
So it's not just about hearing, it's about really understanding what's being said.
Precisely. And the guide offers a really interesting way to practice this. Choose content that you actually enjoy.
Okay.
So if you're into sports, listen to sports commentary. If you love cooking, listen to cooking shows or podcasts.
Uh-huh.
It's like a gym workout for your ears.
I like that.
Yeah.
It makes sense, though, because you're more likely to pay attention and pick up on new vocabulary if you're interested in what you're listening to.
Absolutely. And speaking of picking up on new vocabulary, the guide has some really interesting techniques for that too.
Okay. I'm all ears. What's the secret?
Well, this might sound strange at first, but the guide suggests talking to yourself.
Wait, really? Like
Yeah.
full-on conversations with myself in the mirror?
You don't necessarily need a mirror, but talking to yourself can be a really surprisingly effective technique. Actors, public speakers, even therapists use this
Wow.
to practice their articulation, their pacing, and just get comfortable with the sound of their own voice.
I can see the logic in that, but wouldn't it feel kind of awkward at first?
It might feel strange initially, but the key is to remember there's no pressure to perform. It's just you and your own space.
Okay, yeah.
Getting those vocal cords warmed up and experimenting with different phrases and words.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better.
Yeah.
So it's like a safe space to practice without any judgment.
Exactly.
But how does this actually help with vocabulary?
Well, think of it this way. When you're talking to yourself, you're forced to think about the words you're using and how you're using them. You become more aware of your own speech patterns.
That makes sense. And it's a good way to practice pronunciation too, right?
Absolutely. And speaking of pronunciation, the guide also talks about this technique called shadowing. Have you ever tried that?
Actually, yes. I used to do it with one of my favorite podcast hosts. I would just put on my headphones and try to mimic their tone, pacing, even like their little vocal quirks.
Yeah.
It was surprisingly effective and honestly a lot of fun.
I love that. That's great to hear. It's a really effective way to pick up on the subtleties of delivery and pronunciation.
It's almost like taking those private practice sessions
Right.
to the next level by incorporating someone else's style.
Exactly.
But let's be real. Most of us don't want to sound exactly like someone else. We want to find our own voice.
Absolutely. And that's where building a strong vocabulary comes in.
Okay, so how do we do that? Do we need to memorize the dictionary?
No, not at all. The guide emphasizes that you don't need to cram your head with every word in the dictionary. It's about focusing on useful everyday phrases first.
Okay.
Master those building blocks,
Yeah.
and then gradually expand.
It's about starting small and building from there.
Exactly. And again, it ties back to your goals. So if you're learning a language for travel, focus on phrases related to transportation, dining, asking for directions. If it's for work, prioritize vocabulary specific to your industry.
Okay.
And there are some handy app recommendations in the guide too,
Oh, cool.
like Elsa for pronunciation and Forvo to hear how native speakers pronounce certain words.
Wow, so many great tools out there. But what about those times when you don't have someone to actually practice conversations with?
That's a great question. The guide actually has some clever ideas for simulating real conversations even without a partner. For example, there's this app called Hello Talk.
Okay.
That connects you with language learners from all over the world.
Wow.
So you can have text or voice chats, exchange language tips, and even make some new friends along the way.
That's brilliant. And I bet with the rise of AI, there are some really cool conversational tools popping up too, right?
You're absolutely right. AI chatbots are becoming super sophisticated these days, and they can be a great way to practice your speaking and listening skills in a safe environment.
Okay, yeah.
You can try out different conversation scenarios and get some feedback. Although the guide does mention one more option that I found particularly amusing, talking to your pets.
I have to admit, I've definitely done that before.
Me too.
But in all seriousness, pets can be great listeners, right?
Exactly. And while they might not offer much in the way of verbal feedback, the act of talking out loud is still beneficial for practicing your pronunciation and fluency.
I like that. So, whether it's talking to ourselves, shadowing a favorite speaker, or even just chatting with our furry friends, the key is to find opportunities to practice in a comfortable, low-pressure environment.
Absolutely.
But what about the bigger picture? How do we make real progress and avoid getting discouraged?
That's where the guide's emphasis on consistency over perfection comes in.
Okay.
It really drives home the point that language learning is a journey. It's not a destination.
So it's about making steady progress, not being fluent overnight.
Exactly. It's about embracing those small wins. Celebrate every new word you learn, every pronunciation you nail, every conversation that goes a little more smoothly.
Yeah.
Even short, focused practice sessions can make a huge difference over time.
Right. So it's about building those consistent habits, making communication practice a part of your daily routine.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the importance of setting goals, the power of active listening, and some techniques for practicing speaking and expanding our vocabulary. There seem to be so many different approaches we can take.
Absolutely.
Depending on, our goals and preferences.
Exactly. And the most important thing is to find what works best for you.
Right.
And to keep practicing.
Yeah.
Remember, communication is a skill that can be learned and improved upon.
Well said. Now, before we move on, I want to touch on one specific aspect of communication that I think often gets overlooked.
Okay.
And that's the importance of nonverbal cues.
That's a great point. Nonverbal communication, things like your body language and facial expressions play a huge role in how our messages are received and interpreted.
Totally. I mean, sometimes we might be sending mixed signals without even realizing it.
Exactly. So once you're more aware of your own body language, you can start to adjust it consciously. For example, if you want to project confidence, stand up straight, make eye contact, use those open hand gestures.
Okay, so it's about being mindful of our own cues.
Yes.
And making sure they're aligning with our intentions.
Exactly.
What about reading other people's body language?
That's equally important. Paying attention to nonverbal cues can really help you understand what someone is truly saying, even if their words don't match their body language.
That's so true. Sometimes you can just tell someone's uncomfortable or disagreeing with you, even if they're saying all the right things. So how can we get better at reading those subtle cues?
Well, the guide suggests practicing with people that you know well.
Okay.
Pay attention to their facial expressions, tone of voice, their posture. See if you can pick up on those subtle shifts that might indicate a change in their mood or attitude.
Yeah, it's like a real-life case study.
Exactly.
In nonverbal communication.
Right. And the more we practice,
the
better we become at reading those cues.
Exactly. So it's all about creating this, harmonious and effective communication loop.
Right.
Verbally and nonverbally.
Precisely. And remember, nonverbal communication is just as important as verbal communication when it comes to building strong relationships.
Well said. So we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've talked about the importance of setting goals, the power of active listening, various techniques for practicing speaking, expanding our vocabulary, and even the role of nonverbal communication.
That's right. We've laid a solid foundation for understanding these key elements of effective communication.
And in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to delve even deeper into some strategies and techniques for putting all of this into practice.
That's right.
So stay tuned.
Welcome back, everyone.
I'm ready to dive a little deeper into these communication skills.
Yeah, me too. The guide actually gets really practical, and one area it focuses on is how to create those conversational environments even when you don't have a partner to practice with.
Okay, yeah, that's something I think a lot of people struggle with. I mean, life gets busy. Finding a consistent language partner isn't always easy.
It's not. One thing that stood out to me in the guide was using apps designed specifically for language exchange. Have you ever heard of Hello Talk?
Vaguely, yeah. I haven't really looked into it.
It's pretty cool. It basically connects you with language learners from all over the world. You can text chat, have voice calls, exchange language tips, cultural insights
Wow.
with native speakers. It's like having this whole network of practice partners right there in your pocket.
That sounds amazing. It's like taking those online language courses to the next level by actually interacting with real people.
Exactly. And it solves that problem of finding people who are at a similar skill level as you
Right. Yeah,
and interested in the same language exchange.
that's so smart. I mean, I could try practicing with my Italian-speaking grandma, but,
Yeah.
our conversations usually revolve around pasta recipes and her cat.
Of course.
Not exactly the most stimulating practice for, like, my business vocabulary.
Not quite. Well, Hello Talk lets you filter by language, skill level, and even interest so you can find partners who align with your goals.
Okay, that's one great option. But what about, like, if you're a little intimidated by the idea of jumping straight into conversations with native speakers? The guide mentions AI chatbots, right?
Yes.
Is that a good alternative?
It absolutely can be. They're getting so sophisticated these days.
Hmm.
They can understand and respond to your questions, give you feedback on pronunciation,
Yeah.
and even simulate different conversation scenarios.
So it's like having a virtual conversation partner that's available 24/7. Are there any specific chatbot apps that the guide recommends?
It doesn't go into specific app recommendations,
Okay.
but a quick search online will reveal a ton of different options.
Yeah, probably.
Some are designed for general language practice, while others focus on specific skills. So it's about finding one that fits your needs.
Right, it's like having a personalized language tutor right there in your pocket.
That's a great way to put it.
I remember there was also like a slightly more unconventional suggestion for practicing conversation skills.
Yeah.
Talking to your pets. I mean, it sounds silly, but is there actually any logic to that?
There is. It allows you to practice speaking aloud in a comfortable, low-pressure environment.
Right.
You're getting used to forming those sentences and expressing yourself without worrying about making mistakes.
I guess that makes sense. My dog never judges my grammar.
Ah.
Although he does tend to wander off when I start practicing my Italian conjugations.
Well, at least she's a good listener. Most of the time. But, jokes aside, the point is that even those unconventional activities can offer opportunities for language practice.
I love that. It's about like seeing potential practice opportunities everywhere.
Exactly.
Whether it's like talking to your pet, narrating your daily activities, or even just having imaginary conversations in your head.
The more you can immerse yourself in the language, even
Yeah.
in those small ways, the more natural it's going to start to feel.
It's not just about those formal practice sessions. It's about creating a language-rich environment for yourself.
Exactly. And speaking of practice, the guide really emphasizes that consistency over perfection thing.
Okay.
It reminds us that language learning is a journey, not a destination.
So it's about making steady progress, not about being fluent overnight.
Exactly, and embracing those small wins. Celebrate every new word you learn, every pronunciation you get right, every conversation that goes a little bit smoother.
I like that.
Even those short, focused practice sessions make a huge difference over time. It's about building those habits.
Yeah.
Making that communication practice part of your daily routine.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground when it comes to practicing our speaking and listening skills. Utilizing these apps, leveraging AI chatbots, finding creative ways to practice on your own. But what about those moments when we feel stuck or discouraged? How do we stay motivated and overcome those learning plateaus?
That's a great question. And the guide has some really insightful advice for that. One key strategy is setting realistic goals. We don't need to achieve fluency overnight. So it's about breaking down those larger goals into smaller, more manageable steps.
So instead of aiming for complete fluency right away, maybe focus on mastering a few key phrases or having a short conversation.
Exactly. It's like climbing a mountain. You don't focus on reaching the summit right away. You focus on taking one step at a time.
I like that analogy.
And just like climbing a mountain, there are going to be times when you feel like you're not making progress, or when you hit a really challenging section.
So how do we push through those moments and avoid giving up?
The guide suggests reframing your perspective. So instead of viewing those challenges as setbacks,
Okay.
see them as opportunities for growth.
I like that.
Remember that making mistakes is an essential part of the learning process.
So it's about embracing those mistakes
Yeah.
and learning from them.
Exactly. And it's about celebrating those small victories along the way. Each new word you learn, each conversation you have, each time you push yourself outside of your comfort zone, those are all reasons to celebrate.
It's about finding joy in the process. It's not just the end goal.
Yes. What about those times where we feel like we're just not cut out for language learning?
Right.
What if we're struggling to grasp certain concepts or pronounce certain sounds?
Yeah.
Well, the guide addresses that too. It emphasizes finding resources and support systems that work for you.
Okay.
It encourages us to explore different learning methods and to find what resonates with our own individual learning styles.
So it's about experimenting and not being afraid to try new approaches?
Absolutely. If one method isn't clicking, try a different one. There are so many resources available these days.
Yeah, that's
From language learning apps and online courses to language exchange programs, tutoring sessions.
and there are tons of online communities and forums
Yeah.
where you can connect with other language learners.
Exactly. And having that sense of community and support can make a huge difference when you're feeling stuck or discouraged.
It's like having a cheerleading squad for your language learning adventures.
I love that.
How do we take all of these skills and techniques and apply them to real-world situations? How do we become more effective communicators in our daily lives?
That's the ultimate goal, right? And the guide offers some really practical advice for that. One key strategy it highlights is active listening. And this applies to all aspects of communication, not just language learning.
Okay, so we're back to active listening, but how do we actually practice that in our daily interactions?
The guide suggests focusing on a few key elements. First, pay attention to both the verbal and nonverbal cues the other person is sending. Listen to their words, but also observe their body language, their tone of voice, facial expressions.
So it's about tuning into the whole message, not just the words themselves.
Exactly. And second, ask clarifying questions. Don't be afraid to paraphrase what you've heard or to ask for clarification if something's unclear.
Right, it shows you're truly engaged.
Yes. And third, avoid interrupting or jumping in with your own thoughts before the other person has finished speaking.
Oh, that can be a tough one.
It's a skill that takes practice,
Yeah.
but it's so important for building those strong relationships.
Okay, active listening is key. What about expressing ourselves clearly and confidently? Any tips for improving those speaking skills?
The guide has a couple. It emphasizes being mindful of our language choices.
So thinking before we speak, choosing our words carefully.
Exactly. Consider your audience and the context. Are you using language that's appropriate? Are you conveying your message clearly and concisely?
So it's about tailoring our language to the situation.
Yes. Now, what about those moments when we might feel nervous about speaking up? How do we overcome that and project confidence?
Yeah.
The guide suggests focusing on your body language and your vocal delivery. So stand up straight, make eye contact, use a clear and confident tone of voice. Even if you're feeling nervous on the inside,
Right.
projecting that confidence on the outside can help you feel more in control.
So it's kind of like faking it till you make it.
It is, in a way, but
Yeah.
it's not about being inauthentic. It's about using those tools to support your message and project that confidence.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Active listening, mindful language choices, confident body language, and the importance of finding those support systems and resources that work for you. It seems like there's so many different facets to effective communication.
There are. And the guide reminds us that communication is this lifelong journey of learning and growth.
It's not about reaching a point of perfection. It's about continuing to improve.
Exactly. And embracing those challenges
Yeah.
and celebrating those victories along the way.
I love that. We've explored so much in the second part, but there's one more crucial aspect of communication that we need to talk about: storytelling.
Oh, such a powerful tool for connecting with people, engaging emotions, conveying complex ideas in a memorable way.
Absolutely. How do we get better at it?
Well, the guide has some tips for crafting these compelling stories. First, it emphasizes the importance of identifying the core message you want to get across.
So have a clear purpose for your story.
Yes. What do you want your listeners to walk away with? Once you have that in mind, you can start structuring your story around it.
Okay, so we need a clear message. But what about the actual content of the story? How do we make it engaging?
Well, the guide suggests incorporating vivid details and sensory language that brings the story to life.
Oh, okay.
Instead of just stating facts, Paint a picture with your words. Describe those sights, sounds, smells, tastes, feelings that really draw the listener in.
So it's about appealing to all of the senses.
Exactly, and using strong verbs, descriptive adjectives that add color and texture to your narrative.
Right. It's the difference between like hearing a dry recounting of events
Right.
and being transported into the heart of the story.
Exactly. And another key element, creating a compelling narrative arc.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
It means structuring your story with a clear beginning, middle, and end. Introduce those characters, set the scene, build tension, and then resolve the conflict in a satisfying way.
So it's like creating a mini movie in the listener's mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And a well-crafted narrative arc will keep them engaged, wanting to know what happens next.
I love that. What about those of us who might not feel naturally comfortable with storytelling? Are there any tips for overcoming that self-consciousness?
The guide suggests practicing in low-pressure environments. Share stories with friends, family, try different storytelling styles, and experiment with incorporating humor, emotion, personal anecdotes.
So it's about finding what feels authentic and building our confidence through practice.
Exactly. Remember, everyone has stories to tell. It's just about finding the ones that resonate with you and learning how to share them.
Well said. So we've covered a lot of ground. Practical strategies for practicing our skills, navigating learning plateaus, incorporating active listening, expressing ourselves clearly and confidently, and even harnessing the power of storytelling. It seems like we've touched on every aspect of communication imaginable.
We have covered a lot, but the guide emphasizes that communication is a lifelong journey. There's always more to discover and new skills to develop.
That's so true. I think the key takeaway from this whole deep dive is that effective communication is within reach for all of us.
It is.
It's about being intentional, practicing consistently, and embracing the journey.
Couldn't have said it better myself. I think the best way to wrap up this second part is to encourage our listeners to reflect on what they've learned and start putting these strategies into practice.
I love that. So, listeners, take a moment. Think about one specific skill or technique you want to focus on. Maybe it's improving your active listening, practicing storytelling, or exploring new ways to create those language-rich environments for yourself.
Yeah, and once you've identified that skill, set a small, achievable goal for yourself and take action. Even small steps lead to big progress.
Well said. And in the final part, we'll explore some additional resources and strategies for staying motivated and continuing to grow as communicators. So stay tuned.
Welcome back to the final part of our communication deep dive.
Yeah.
It's been a journey. We've unpacked a lot about speaking, listening, those nonverbal cues. Absolutely everything from setting goals and mastering active listening to, those AI chatbots and practicing our Italian with our pets.
Yeah. I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about and a lot of tools they can use right away.
Absolutely. But I think before we wrap up, it's important to talk about this ongoing nature of learning and growth.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's easy to think that once we've learned a few techniques or reached a certain level of fluency, we're good. But communication is a lifelong journey, isn't it?
It really is. And just like any journey, there will be ups and downs, moments of progress, and moments of frustration. So the key is to just stay curious, stay engaged, and keep seeking out those new opportunities for growth.
So how do we do that? How do we, nurture our communication skills and avoid getting stuck?
The guide offers some good suggestions. One is seeking out different perspectives.
Okay.
This could involve reading books and articles on communication, listening to podcasts.
Like this one.
Exactly, or attending workshops, seminars.
So it's about exposing ourselves to those different ideas, even the ones that challenge what we think.
Exactly, stepping outside of that comfort zone.
I love that. It's like cross-training for your communication muscles.
I like that.
But what about those times when we might feel like we're hitting a plateau? How do we overcome those challenges?
The guide really stresses seeking feedback from others.
Okay.
This could be asking a trusted friend or colleague for their honest opinion, joining a public speaking group, or a Toastmasters club.
Yeah, that can be scary, though.
It can be.
Yeah.
But it's also incredibly valuable.
Oh, for sure.
To get that outside perspective, especially from people who can give specific and actionable feedback.
It's a chance to see, our blind spots, right?
Exactly. And while it might feel intimidating to get that criticism, remember that it's an opportunity to grow.
Yeah, you've got to be open to it. Okay, so we need to seek feedback, even if it's a little uncomfortable. But, what about if you feel self-conscious or hesitant to put yourself out there? How do we build that confidence?
The guide suggests focusing on your strengths, celebrating those successes.
Yeah.
It reminds us that everyone has their own communication gifts and talents, and we need to identify those and really nurture them.
So it's about recognizing what we do well and building from there.
Exactly. And acknowledging our progress,
Yeah.
no matter how small.
Right.
Each time we try a new technique, each time we connect with someone, those are reasons to celebrate.
It's about finding the joy in the journey.
Yes,
And recognizing that those small steps can make a big difference.
they really can.
Yeah.
And speaking of difference, I think it's important to say that improving these skills can have a huge impact on our lives.
Yeah.
It can make our relationships stronger, enhance our careers, and even just boost our confidence and well-being.
Yeah. Communication is at the heart of everything we do.
It really is. So when we invest in these skills, we're investing in ourselves and in our ability to create a more fulfilling life.
I love that. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. Effective communication is not a destination.
Right.
It's a journey. And it's a journey worth taking.
Absolutely. So let's all embrace the challenges, celebrate those victories, and keep striving to be the best communicators we can be.
And remember, we're all in this together, so let's support each other, share our experiences, and continue to learn and grow. Thanks for joining us.